Is a low carb diet better than a low fat diet for fat loss? Let's talk about that. How's it going, guys? My name's Richie Kirwan, and today we're going to talk about one of the greatest nutrition rivalries of all time. You see, people always want to know which is the best approach, be it conventional versus sumo deadlifts. It's conventional, by the way. Cardio versus weights. Weights wins, hands down. Vegan versus carnivore. Personally, I'm a big fan of the carny vegan diet. And today, we're going to talk about the difference between low fat and low carb diet approaches, and which, if any, is better for fat loss. Along the way, we'll also talk about how our body stores and burns fat and how weight loss and weight gain happen. Before I go any further, I want to point out that I'm not going to recommend any specific diet in this video. In my opinion, one of the most important factors of any diet is someone's ability to enjoy it and stick to it long term. That means that the diet one person can stick to really easily may be very different from a diet that someone else enjoys and can adhere to. If you take anything from my videos, I really hope you learn that you don't have to restrict yourself to believing in one single dietary approach for everyone. Humans don't work that way, and neither do diets. So, first off, I think it's a good idea to talk about how we actually burn fat in the first place. Our body fat is called adipose tissue, and one of its main functions is to store energy in the form of triglycerides. A triglyceride is a molecule made up of 3 fatty acids joined to a molecule of glycerol. Triglycerides, or fats, are a really great way of storing energy because they can store a lot of energy compared to other macronutrients. 1 gram of triglycerides or fat stores 9 calories, whereas 1 gram of either protein or carbohydrates stores only about 4 calories, meaning they're less than half as efficient for energy storage. That said, our body does store some carbohydrate in the form of glycogen in our muscles and liver, and uses this to maintain our blood glucose levels when we haven't eaten and as a fuel for high intensity exercise. When we haven't eaten in a while, when blood glucose levels are normal, and when we're not exercising intensely, our body gets energy from our body fat. An enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase breaks down triglycerides to glycerol and fatty acids. Those fatty acids get exported out of the fat cell and are transported in the blood attached to a protein transporter called albumin. These free fatty acids travel around the body to provide fuel for cells. Simple, right? Now, if we burn more fat from our fat cells than we eat, over time, we lose body weight. Now, when we eat a meal with a mix of protein, carbs, and fats, something different happens. When we digest our food, protein and carbs get absorbed directly into our bloodstream from the gut in the form of amino acids and sugars. The increase in blood sugar and amino acids causes our body to produce insulin, which has a really important job. It helps to bring our blood sugar back down to normal levels, because high blood sugar for a long time can be bad for our health. So there are a few ways that insulin brings our blood sugar back down. The first thing is it inhibits hormone-sensitive lipase, so we don't get any more fat breakdown. This means our body has to burn carbohydrates or amino acids instead for energy. This means your body is in a glycolytic state, burning glucose for energy. Insulin also increases storage of both glucose and free fatty acids to help get them out of your bloodstream. Glucose can be stored as glycogen, and if your glycogen stores are at their limit, then glucose can be converted to fat in the liver and stored as body fat. Free fatty acids get converted back to triglycerides and stored as body fat too. So with this explanation, it's very easy to think, holy crap, if I eat carbs and raise my insulin, then I'm going to be storing fat all the time. All I need to do is not eat carbs, my insulin will be low, I'll start burning fatty acids, and I won't store any more body fat, right? While that makes a lot of sense on the surface, it's actually way too simple a way of thinking about and completely ignores a very important point known as energy balance. You see, no matter what fuel we use, carbs or fats, our body still needs to use the same amount of energy to be alive and active, more or less. If you don't eat enough food to meet those needs, your body will be in a negative energy balance, and over time, you'll lose body fat. On the other hand, if you eat more food than your body needs to burn to survive, this is called positive energy balance. That extra energy you get from your food needs to go somewhere. Our bodies, in general, don't like waste, so that extra energy will get stored as either glycogen, if there's room, or body fat, which humans have a virtually unlimited storage capacity for. And over time, that leads to weight gain. So if you go on a carb-free diet that doesn't spike your insulin and get most of your energy from fat, while it might be nice to think that you won't be able to gain body fat because you're just burning fat, the truth is different. If you eat more fat, you will burn more fat, but you're burning the fat you're eating. And if you're eating more fat than you burn, you will store that extra as body fat because you don't need high insulin to store fat. Excess calories is more than enough. Okay, so far, anything I've spoken about is what we call the mechanism of fat loss. But how does that all play out in practice? Do we have any weight loss studies that compare low fat with low carb? Well, luckily enough, we have a lot of such studies. So let's talk about one of the best controlled low fat versus low carb studies, which was run by Kevin Hall at the National Institute of Health in the US. It had 19 participants with obesity. The average body mass index was 35, and it was performed in a metabolic ward. That means that the participants lived in the research center during the experiment, and all the food that they ate and exercise they did was monitored to the highest possible level. It was a crossover design, which meant that all the participants got to do both the reduced fat, high carb, and the reduced carb, high fat diet for 2 weeks each, with a 2 to 4 week washout period in between. Both diets were isocaloric, which means they had the same calories and put the participants in a 30% energy deficit. Both diets also had the same amount of protein, at about 20%. In nutrition science like this, it's really important to be able to control as many factors as possible so that you know that any differences in results are caused by, in this case, the difference in carbs and fats. So what happened? Well, as you'd expect, on the reduced carb diet, insulin dropped more than 20%. On top of that, fat oxidation or fat burning increased a lot. Again, as you'd expect, considering the participants were getting most of their energy from fat. Now, at this point, I'm going to remind you that the extra fat oxidation is going to be a combination of burning body fat and burning the fat that they were eating. But the interesting finding was the effect on just burning body fat, which at the end of the day is what people care about when it comes to a weight loss study. The researchers calculated that the reduced carb group was burning 53 grams of body fat per day, but the reduced fat group was actually burning 89 grams of body fat per day. So overall, the reduced fat group was actually burning more body fat. Now, this was just a 2-week study, but it does help to show when it comes to burning body fat. A calorie deficit seems to be a lot more important than keeping insulin low, because remember, that low carb group had lower insulin, but were burning less body fat. But what about longer term studies in the real world? Do we have any good studies comparing low carb and low fat diets? You bet we do. Professor Christopher Gardner ran the Diet Fits trial, which compared weight loss on a healthy low-fat diet versus a healthy low-carbohydrate diet for 12 months. This was a free living experiment, which means people were living their normal lives and were told how to eat. That means you can't monitor what the people do or eat as well as in a metabolic ward study, but the results are a lot more realistic because people can't be controlled and told how to eat in the real life. This study also had over 600 participants, which made the results a lot more reliable. All the participants were given education on how to either lower their carbs or fats as much as possible, depending on the group that they were in. The low-fat diet group had an average of 48% carbs and 29% fat, and the low-carb group had an average of 30% carbs and 45% fat. And I know people are going to say that's not very low carb or low fat, but this is what people do in the real world. And what happened at 12 months? Well, both groups, on average, lost weight. The low-fat group lost 5.3 kilos, and the low-carb group lost 6 kilos on average. So they lost 700 grams more. But this wasn't statistically significant, and 700 grams over a year isn't really a meaningful amount of weight loss either. Also, this study didn't look exclusively at body fat, so part of the difference could be losses of body water, which we know are greater on low-carb diets. On top of that, the insulin levels of the participants had absolutely no effect on weight loss either. What was really interesting about this study is that it was funded by the Nutrition Science Initiative, or NUSI, an organization that pretty much has the goal of proving that carbs and insulin cause weight gain. So the fact that their study didn't show that was a pretty big deal. I could talk about a lot more studies in detail, but we have so many that we even have meta-analyses of studies. A meta-analysis is when you combine the results of multiple similar studies to find out what the overall effect is. Now, there have actually been a lot of meta-analyses comparing low-fat and low-carb and other diets over the years, and they have more or less had the same results. One of the more recent studies used data from 53 other studies with over 68,000 participants and a duration of 12 months. The analysis showed that on average, the low-carb diets resulted in about 1.15 kilograms more weight loss than the low-fat diets. Again, 1.15 kilograms over 12 months isn't a big difference when it comes to body weight, and we always have to think how much of that difference is body water, and is there much of a difference, if any, in body fat. With all the evidence that we have, we can say that when it comes to fat loss, low-carb diets are probably just as effective as low-fat diets. We definitely don't have any evidence to say that low-carb diets have any magic weight loss effect, and we can also say that lowering insulin doesn't affect weight loss either. So, which should you choose? Low-carb or low fat? Well, that is completely up to you and what you prefer. You see, the most important factor when it comes to long-term body fat loss is being able to stick to a diet. If you can't stick to a diet, whatever diet it may be, because you hate the foods you're eating, then you're not going to be able to maintain that weight loss. If you want long-term success, you need to find a way of eating that you can enjoy and stick to long-term. For some people, that might be lower fat. For some, it might be lower carb. Find what works for you and don't fall for all the divisive and dogmatic diet that you see on the internet every day. As long as you eat fewer calories, both low fat and low carb diets will work. I really hope that's cleared up some of the confusion about low carb and low fat diets. As always, if you have any more questions, let me know in the comments below and let us know about your own experience with low carb or low fat diets. And remember to hit that like button and to subscribe to the Myprotein YouTube channel for more great evidence-based nutrition information.